Welcome to the swingin' 60s. We're on the final home run now. I put off this video for two reasons. Number one, I want to do Troughton's era justice, and number two, as a kid I skipped so much of the 60s. Yeah, the crucial classics, the Dalek Invasion of Earths, Unearthly Child, The Mind Robbers, all missing on my shelf. But it's now we're here, in the decade of music and love, that the difference between good and bad stories becomes a lot more arbitrary. We're in deep niche sci-fi serial zone now. Instead, I'll be ranking the stories more on how timeless, different, or compelling they are. And someone who matches all of those words is one Patrick Troughton. Ooh, transition. The greatest Troughton stories are the ones with Troughton actually in them. Yeah, that might sound obvious, but the comics, the audios, and the novels are all lacking a certain charm. I mean, I've been carrying around Justin Richards' Dreams of Empire for about a month, just for decorative reasons, I guess. But inside, Richards actually confesses why the magic of number 2 doesn't translate to other mediums. First, this is a Doctor who is at odds with his appearance more than any other. He seems to be a buffoon, it appears he's out of his depth. When he saves the day, it's possible it could have all been a lucky accident. But there are moments, flashes, when we glimpse of a strategic genius beneath. He's a Doctor entirely about what you do and don't see. The Doctor's face is constantly animated, always expressive. His hands are rarely still. Even the way he walks into a room speaks volumes about his mood and his intent. Getting that across without seeing Patrick Troughton's unique, incredible, formative performance is very difficult. Maybe it's impossible. And to that, I can only think, what a tragedy it is that so many of Troughton's visuals, the episodes of his era, are missing. It's a visual performance, and one so iconic you can actually picture it as you play along, but these are just imitations of the second. Assumptions and characterized exaggerations of how Troughton would handle a scene. There are some fantastic Troughton impressionists out there, don't get me wrong, from Chris Walker-Thompson to Fraser Hines himself. But watch Troughton's episodes and there's such a distinct unpredictability to how he'll handle the material. It is magic nuance that he's bringing to a very simple children's character. So, who is 2? 2 is the tactician. But on top of being some deceptive mastermind, I think it's very easy to also gloss over the tomfoolery. Unlike the many Doctors to emulate him in the years ahead, from McCoy, Smith, Tennant, and even arguably Baker, it's his clownish innocence that isn't actually the act. It's not a guise, another move on a chessboard like it is with some later incarnations. No, 2 is very authentically a space hobo who goes on fun adventures with his friends. This Doctor is skittish, goofy and anxious. The Buster Keaton-like comedy routine is this Doctor at his truest, and it's almost as if the higher stakes and frightening displays of evil prevent him from being his sensitive, just, and mindful self, rather than the other way around. Davison, McCoy, and Matt Smith have all actually cited Troughton as their main influence for the role, and the three of them definitely adopted the playing the idiot trope as well. But rather than it all being a guise, another move on a chessboard, the second Doctor's disarming comedy is him. A nerve-wracked, slightly paranoid man being pulled into life-or-death situations. And his superpower? Talking himself out of trouble. That starts here. He's intelligent and crafty with scraps, but nowhere near as much as his later incarnations. This Doctor is as timeless as he is because he doesn't feel human. Oh, he's very humble and silly and small in stature, but I always get the vibe of naughty demigod. He can be kind, he can be cruel, but most of all, he's just preoccupied and a little bit passive. Very fond of his friends, but also very distant from them mentally. And in his affections and conflicts with his companions, you really get a sense of how different he is. He's an impish, yet very capable man, just getting the hang of his new lifestyle. And his run is amazing for it. Great monsters, great scripts, great performances. My job here is to think of characterization and development. That's not really the case for these older Doctors. Hartnell's Doctor was the one who developed, had the arc. Troughton is very much an actor trying to stabilize the show and root it with a new leading man, whilst going for something completely different, admirably different. And it's these key decisions that one man made that grounded the Doctor as a clown, hero, trickster. It's a rare combination, it can be done, and I'm realising with every passing story, Patrick Troughton is very much the reason this show persists. He is the foundational reason this is my favourite fictional character ever. And if I was to really lay myself down on the line, I would even argue that every actor since, bar maybe Pertwee, has been playing a version of the Second Doctor all this time. Yeah, that's how influential this performance is, historically. And that is no slight on Hartnell, he is every bit as crucial to the show's legacy. But it's the features specifically of this Doctor that persevere. He formed the timeless basis of the character that we associate with the Doctor mould now. And for this reason and more, I think it's safe to call him the best Doctor objectively. Now, of course, yeah, there's no such thing, and I have a couple of other favourites closer to my heart, but come on, who dislikes 2? There's nothing to dislike. To disagree with this incarnation's choices is like to disagree with the heart and centre of the show. But that said, he was still in the Dominators. Now, before we commence the dunking, let me just say I don't want this one on here. Great cast, brilliant dialogue, adorable villains I wouldn't mind seeing an update of. As a Dom myself, I want it perfectly clear that this story has more good than bad in it. But to call it an underrated story is an overstatement. The Doctor lands on the nuked DALEKS, home to the Dole people. I'm not quite sure what the helpless inclusion of the pacifist society in this story is trying to say, other than, it's the 60s and pacifism doesn't work, you dirty hippies. But I appreciate the many links between them and the later Time Lords, which I'd almost call foreshadowing. It's just a shame that nothing ever comes of it. The Doctor Bohemian parallel Cully is settled elsewhere with Jamie, and they mysteriously leave the story without adding much of anything to the plot except a line saying, "Pacifism has made us prisoners to our morals." Big yikes. Big, interesting yikes. And yeah, whilst I admire a change in perspective, this is definitely the most pantomime response to unilateralism I've ever seen. Mark Braxton described it as having a lack of audience identification, and the ending is notably off-brand for Doctor Who. In the novelisation, he blows the Dom Dads to Kingdom Come, with not one, but 2 grinning puns about eggs. Thank you, Ian Marter, you strange, strange man. I'll never understand the fandom's brick wall bandwagon approach to mass branding specific stories as bad. Like, come on, have you seen the good ones? But the Dominators is pretty harmless. Is it the monsters? No, I think the Quarks are actually quite effective. I'll take iconic and cute over convincing any day. They're not the Daleks they were designed to replace, but still a great, striking 60s design. Is it the plot? No, this is archetypal stuff. School playground bullies. It's an action piece where Jamie teaches the peace-loving hippies how to throw rocks. And it's quite a bit of fun. But even across 126 pages, there's a lot of repetition. It's definitely a better novelisation than a bit of TV. I think 10 put it best. Without your Quarks, you Dominators are really a bunch of paper tigers. Lots of words, but not much to back it up. Bullies, really? And I don't like bullies. Also, Rhaego and Toba are boyfriends. The Dominators are boyfriends. I ship it. Number 2. The Wheel! In space! The ugly duckling of the 60s Cybermen stories. Slow and a little bit tedious. What originally begins as a disarming quiet and moody tone, Wheel quickly reveals itself to just be a bit tedious. We weren't building tension or atmosphere, we were just walking around looking for the plot. But those first 2 episodes are just pure exploration. 2 characters, an abandoned space station, and a trundly robot. It's pure stripped-back Doctor Who. The first episode was animated along with the Macro Terror by Sun and Moon Studios. And whilst it is its own thing, it really does show how impressive Who is, just basking in its own premise. With some beautiful animation and direction, it just made me hope for something new. Naturally, a normal stock Base Under Siege is just around the corner, so don't worry about that, and it's incredibly similar to what we've seen before. The pudgy Cybermen have settled into a routine, and for some unremarkable reason are still being treated like last-minute surprise villains, even though they show up every other week. Instead, I'd actually call the main villain of this piece the Cybermats. And yeah, not good. You've been stung by the Tingler! Scream! Scream for your life! Yeah, only 2 episodes exist to this thing, and even still it contains the worst piece of acting in the show's long, long history. and that's saying something. Where did you find this guy? I love the enthusiasm, but he's in a different show. The Wheel in Space, famously, was meant to be the first crossover between the Daleks and the Cybermen, which would have been something. Hard to view now, with a Dalek-sized hole in it. It's both just a little bit too complicated and a bit too boring for its own good. Every single cliffhanger is just a Cyberman popping out. What's up? Please let us in. Like, come on dude, no, what happened to your voices? Get out of here! And then there's the secondary cast. New Doctor Who is very good at making groups of people distinct and likeable in a short period of time. Classic Who, less so. Hey, fun game. Tell me which of these sidecasts is from the serial The Wheel in Space. It's none of them. Here's a trick, they're all the same. Luckily, the only one of them that matters is Zoe, and Zoe does turn out to be a pretty great character. For similar reasons, I also didn't get on with the Ice Warriors. The inexpensive Base Under Siege stories defined this era, but they weren't all winners. The Ice Warriors aren't ready yet, the characters are deathly dull, and it's 6 episodes of people just shouting, "We need to listen to the computer!" Computer, 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 from the first lines to the final moments. Mind-boggling, I thought I was losing my mind. Of the two, I would say Wheel is marginally better, even if just because Zoe be a cutie. Loose Cannon must be commended for what is a great visualization. Of all of the reconstructions, this is probably the best. The Night Witches. Great box art, glowing reviews, top cast, and yet. The TARDIS crew land in Stalingrad in 1942, where they are captured by an all-female unit of fighter pilots, and one of them is the spitting image of Polly. Maybe I'm just getting cynical, but companion duplicates are so contrived. You know exactly where it's gonna go, you've seen it before, Polly will pretend to be a doppelganger and we'll get the obligatory reveal that everybody is waiting for. I'm Potty. Come on, Doctor, let's return to the TARDIS. And then suddenly the entire cast turn into idiots and can't even recognise their own best friend. Yeah, I've seen it before, I knew it was coming. It popped up! Whether it's Nyssa or Chameleon or the second Doctor. That trope happens on TV to give actors a change of pace and maintain the budget. But on audio, there is no good reason an actress should be playing 2 different roles. It's a plot device. On audio, you sound the same! But maybe this just isn't my kind of story. Niche history is great fertile soil for Who, but over 4 episodes I learned nothing about the Night Witches and the female Russian pilots of World War II. I know I campaign for pure historicals, but if there's this little going on, hell, throw in the Daleks or the Rani. I'd even take a Croton if it spiced the plot up somewhat. Instead we have Nadia Vazny. The commander whose name I obviously had to look up, and it's still probably wrong. Our main antagonist is another military stiff who sees the TARDIS crew, decides they're spies immediately, and never really grows past it or finds an actual motivation for 2 hours. Where have I heard that before? And our villain has some plans for the gang, and by that I mean one plan. For 4 episodes. It's staggering how much they try to pull out of one plot thread. We don't even see the German enemy. £15 and 2 hours on one bait and switch idea. As formulaic as episodic 60 serials could be, this was released in 2017. It's Big Finish, dude. You don't have to play it so safe. The Underwater Menace. Nobody will be seated during the episode 3 Fish People Ballet. This is total pantomime hijinks with a true Scooby-Doo level villain. I think the deciding factor for whether you view this one as a campy classic or a wet fish is what kind of fan you are. I mean me, I love it, but I understand the reputation it has. Look past 1 or 2 costumes and there's a really compelling immersive story here in a bonkers landscape. A story I love on the worst list? Again? Yeah man, it's one of those videos. It's ridiculous fluff, but adventurous fluff. The great scientist Zaroff might be nobody's favourite villain, but the way he's established is really unique, making this essentially a period piece with the Doctor meeting a historical figure from our future? And finding out that the Shakespeare Marco Polo historical figure is the villain, that's fascinating and should be done again for real this time. It's a great hammy performance, in the same way I'd watch a Vincent Price or a William Castle film and just ignore the wires. The wires in this case, specifically holstering the infamous fish people. Though yes, some of the weakest costumes in the show's history, I actually found them oddly chilling. It's probably the first example of body horror in the series, reduced to a bioengineered slave species. Give them another shot, I find them a lot scarier and a lot more tragic than I did as a kid. What's much more criminal is the blow up the planet madman motivation.
Why do you want to blow up the world?
The reconstructions in episode 1 and 4 are also terrible. Truly just a why did you release this level of craft put into the PowerPoint presentation. I'm just bitter that so much of Troughton's physical comedy and expression is lost to time. So yeah, it's kooky and weird and filled with personality, and I don't understand how that's not what you want from an episode of Classic Who. It's well made, gloriously stupid, and incredibly watchable. What I'm saying is, it's Troughton's time monster. So yeah, I'd call it underrated, and one of my favourites. It also contains the classic series' funniest joke.
Stand by, here we go.
Please, let it be Chelsea 1966.
I hope it's a Daleks, I don't think. Prehistoric monsters. What have I come upon?
And number 5, the dreaded Space Pirates. Well, it's not great. Sorry, no fun takedown or contrarian hot take here, it's just genuinely not all that good. Just creative autopilot. It's broadcast padding, designed to be padding, with the efforts of the serial drained by the massive 60s finale happening right around the corner. This basic taking of attention and resources is absolutely apparent. Sometimes us nerds are too linked in with the production anecdotes and mythologized TV history to view some stories for what they actually are, but this isn't one of those cases. It's genuinely very little to work with. It's so slight and nothing that you're surprised that the TARDIS crew even bothered to show up. The most exciting thing to happen in it is the explosion at the end of part 1, and I mean, just look at it. Space pirates weren't exactly a new concept back in the 60s either, but from what we have, it looks good, it's shot well. Some actors' accounts have said this story was great in rehearsals, but then was just rushed through production. And yeah, sounds about right. When a story is 50% audio, you're kind of forced to focus on the plot, and I don't think that's a priority here. This is just the absolute culmination of every tired trope that this era fell back on and was just starting to be characterized by. There's no frills or deviation from formula. In fact, it's so standard fare, this could have been improvised. We can't really blame the writer for that. No, I blame the war games. Frequently coming at the top of Doctor Who polls, Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dix present Story Loop, the movie. Or at least its feature length, and by feature length I mean Ben-Hur. A 10-episode epic brought to us by some of the show's greatest writers, which seems to just be a script of being captured and escaping, and then getting captured and escaping. Even the Time Lords get in on it. Gross oversimplification, I know, but I just never have gotten this one. Maybe I'm missing something. In no other medium could I imagine the main cast taking on such a passive role for so much of the runtime. Other episodes of this length have more variety, and I'm not sure War Games ever justifies those 10 episodes. Supposedly, this is a story out of the Doctor's depth, but it doesn't actually push or test our main cast in any meaningful way. Their role is almost entirely reactionary. I'm more convinced that people overestimate this one based on its first and last episodes. And yeah, they're excellent. It might be sacrilege and the editor in me, but this story could have easily been 4 parts long. With the infiltration of the War Room being a late part 3 edition, like in The Mind Robber. The Time Lord ending, although sudden and largely unsatisfying, is not a deus ex machina, as all characters seem to understand the cost. The Second Doctor has some of the most imaginative premises in the show's history, but War Games signs off a real slavish focus on formula, so when change comes, it's not a moment too soon. And that's quite something to say about my favourite classic Doctor of all time. But yeah, on a serious note, thank you Terrance Dicks for Horror Fang Rock, The Five Doctors, State of Decay, Brain of Morbius, half the brilliant Target Range, and yes, the War Games. On to the best, because we need some positivity in here, quick! Number 1, The Invasion. The Invasion definitely has its slumps, pacing-wise, but still remains one of my favourite Doctor Who serials ever made. With only 2 episodes missing from the archive, this large-scale, high-stakes epic got the original animated treatment. Cosgrove Hall tackled the story following off on their work on Scream the Shouker, and it was a great, inexpensive experiment in 2007, in my opinion, remains the best animated story. This is thanks to the moody expressionism of the Cybermen and the shadows hanging over the jagged, stark lines of Troughton's face. It's a lot more static than many modern attempts, but perfectly suited for a story with ample stare-offs. Upon rewatch, I truly did forget how much of those first 4 episodes is spent battling an answering machine around an office. It does feel like a series of sets, and you get so sick of Mr. Vaughan's office. But you can't ask for much more. It's got the most iconic lineup of any story of this era. A genuinely unsettling and scary tone. Iconic images everywhere. Formal introduction of units. The greatest Bond villain that never was. Packer! And Isabel Watkins, who I have to remind myself whilst watching, is not a regular. Everybody is superbly established within their first scenes, creating defined characters you want to follow for 8 episodes. This and Web of Fear were actively test running a new Earthbound military format. Whilst the Yeti in the Underground might be my dad's childhood story, The Invasion is mine. When I criticise other stories of not being memorable, I'm thinking of The Invasion, and how I can tell you every bit of dialogue, character name and cliffhanger off the top of my head. Cyber-wise, the late 60s do great things with the Cybermen, as they seem to improve in every story. They will convert you. They do scream at their own existence. Get ready to never hear that again until 2006. The Cybermen midpoint entrance is timeless and better than Telos and Mondas combined. I like the different resolution. I love Vaughan's arrogant idiot plan, just walking on thin ice for 8 episodes. There is a sequel to this story that I don't think I even finished, because it was more about slugs than Cybermen. Number 2, I can't even describe to you guys how ambitious The Abominable Snowman is. If the original missing episodes are half as good as the reconstructions and the novelization are, and in many cases, they'd have to be, it's one of the standout stories of the 60s. Not only does the TARDIS plonk us in the Himalayas, but then goes the full mile with the expansive setting of the Detsen Monastery, which is now honestly one of my favourite locations in the verse. Tibetan monks that have been played and corrupted for centuries. The Doctor returns from some unseen visit, brandishing their holy sacred bell, but in the middle of a Temple Under Siege story we have the unlikable Professor Travers, and the captain of the warrior monks, Krisong. Is that a contradiction of terms? Yes, which actually helps make the noble conflicted hard-ass Krisong a really likeable tsundere of an ally. And oh look, another society of scared pacifists incapable of defending themselves. Don't worry, the Doctor and Jamie will show them the error of their ways. Let's talk about the companions. 60 years and we've never seen characters like this really show up again. Jamie and the Doctor moan like a married couple, but hey, give McCrimmon a practical problem and you have an uber-capable companion. Then you've got Zoe, trying to escape her programming. Logical and slightly competitive. The juxtaposition between Jamie and Zoe creates a superb dynamic as explored in The Integral, Wreck of the World, but I was also surprised by Victoria Wakefield. An unwilling traveller. Begins to show courage and curiosity and cunning right off the bat. Often in distress, yes, but more inquisitive than most Who Screamers, and more likeable than the fandom lets on. Without the visuals, Snowmen may seem a little drawn out for 6 episodes. It does require effort on the audience's part, so I recommend the novel. Terrance Dicks was a fantastically vivid writer, and this story is just testament to his skill in adaptation. The Mind Robber! When I told some of you that it was my first time watching The Mind Robber, a number of people popped up and even claimed it as their favourite Who serial ever. And I'm finding it rather difficult to argue against that. The land of fiction is such balls-to-the-wall boldness that not only could it not come from any other sci-fi series, but not even from any other era of this show. The absolute peak of classic Who's creativity, and not just as a script on edibles, but even as a production. Actor on holiday this week? That's fine, just split him up for it. We're going to turn him into cardboard and have the Doctor reassemble his face incorrectly to recast him for 20 minutes. Inspired mad brilliance. It's that 60s charming playfulness, but now with confidence. Stunning TV effect shots, scary and funny, sets that, although clearly shallow in the frame, make the finale feel huge and perfectly on theme theatrically for the story. Bring in stop motion, bring in the unicorn. This is a different Who. A gutsy, confident Who that has found its feet and true abstract potential. A potential that classic Who arguably never finds again. But I dare you to watch this without an impressed smile on your face. Then go check out the audio trilogy that I listened to first for some reason.
Evil of the Daleks!
I must confess, I may have decided Evil was a favourite before I had even seen it. Even by the surviving episode 3 alone, you can feel such a unique atmosphere of a tale. Now, I love me a Dalek story because 9 times out of 10 in classic Who it ensures snappy pacing. Daleks in the title? Oh, you'll get them in the episode 1 cliffhanger, no problem. The Troughton run-ins are both written by David Whittaker, and holy hell, whilst Nation might have brought scale, imagination, and life to Dalek Mania, it's Whittaker's stories that do the most with them. Daleks that question why humans would want to kill others. Daleks who giggle and play like children. The 60s are weird like that. They're kooky pulp sci-fi until they suddenly step it up out of nowhere.
They're taking me for a ride! Jamie! They're playing a game!
This story is just beyond unique. A battle? Oh, that's one thing. A base under siege is another. But an ongoing, high-stakes scientific experiment is so inspired and unique a frame for a plot that it's no surprise that 7 episodes fly by. Maybe nobody wrote for Daleks as well as Whittaker. Cold, scary, and for the one time in the classic series, truly capable of anything. This would have been a fine finale to the Daleks, but thank God it wasn't. And last of all, Daughter of the Gods. Stellar story. Imagine if the show celebrated its 5th anniversary with the first multi-Doctor story, Lost to Time. Novel concept. I've always adored what-if scenarios, and doomed Doctor Losers timelines are a guilty pleasure. This combines them both. The best stories are ones that make you wonder, why hasn't this been done before? David K. Barnes does something brilliant and brand new. Don't just have 2 Doctors in the same story, both playing second fiddle to one another. Ultimately, these crossovers have 2 heroes occupying the same role, and engaging in witty banter along the way. Well, what if you had a crossover that had our cast conflict over ideology rather than just petty insults? Something serious comes between the two, splitting our TARDIS teams in half. Taking place in a world where the Doctor and Steven weren't present to stop the Dalek master plan, we have some of the greatest heroic moments from both Doctors. Neither are wrong-footed in their moral code and both are in the right. And seeing them and their friends navigate that during the hostile takeover of the spaceport is done so authentically and effortlessly that Barnes will quickly become a favourite. No part of this story is underfulfilled. It's a story carried through all the way to the end. That was a long video. If you got to the end of it, I commend you. I'm off to read the 112 William Hartnell stories I've never seen. Wish me luck.